Edward, who suffers from neurofibromatosis, lives in New York and dreams of becoming an actor. So far, his only role has been a tiny part in an educational video meant to stop bullying toward people with unique appearances. Unfortunately, the director criticizes his performance, and Edward heads home, crushed. On the subway ride back, he watches the people around him, feeling like every single pair of eyes is locked on his face. He catches strangers staring until a rude passenger starts harassing others. Just then, another man hands Edward a business card, saying he's looking for people with unconventional looks for a film. Oddly enough, the guy doesn't seem to notice Edward's distinctly disfigured face. Soon after, Edward gets home and notices a beautiful young woman moving into the apartment next door. When he steps inside his own place, he finds a leak in the ceiling. He places a bowl under the dripping water and starts doing chores. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. Startled, Edward cuts his finger with a knife. Standing there is his new neighbor, who, seeing the blood, quickly runs to grab a first aid kit to treat his wound. The woman, Ingrid, is confident and assertive, the complete opposite of Edward, who fumbles through her flood of questions with awkward grunts. As Ingrid looks around, she spots a photograph of a young woman and a little boy. Edward admits it's his mother. Ingrid realizes his disfigurement wasn't congenital. She asks what he does for work, but then notices a typewriter and assumes he's a writer. Edward denies it, saying he just found it on the street. Still, Ingrid reads a few lines he'd typed and finds them deep and tragic. She reveals she's an aspiring playwright, and, when she learns Edward's an actor, suggests they could chase fame together. Ironically, she had originally come over just to borrow laundry detergent. The next day, Edward visits his doctor, who warns him that the tumor growth might soon affect his vision. The doctor offers him a chance to join a trial for a new experimental drug that could potentially cure his condition. Though unproven, it might completely change his life. When Edward returns home, he finds his front door freshly painted and figures Ingrid must have done it, thanks to a trail of paint leading to her apartment. Inside, though, things have gotten worse. The hole in his ceiling has grown bigger. He sets a bucket under the leak, and later brings the typewriter to Ingrid's place as a housewarming gift. She thanks him, but her boyfriend suddenly shows up, forcing Edward to leave. The next day, Edward auditions for a role by delivering Shylock's monologue. Despite pouring his heart into it, the producers stay unimpressed. Deflated, he leaves. That evening, Edward shows Ingrid the social ad he appeared in, a short clip reminding people that those with unique appearances are vital parts of society and workplaces. It highlights that even though our brains are wired to judge first impressions, it's important to look again. Ingrid isn't too impressed, but she unexpectedly suggests treating the skin on Edward's nose. Since no one besides doctors has ever touched his face, he's so uncomfortable that she drops the idea. Edward decides to undergo the experimental treatment. At the clinic, he lies on a special table while machines scan his face to analyze the tumors. The new drug is injected beneath his skin, and they make a mold of his face, giving him a journal to log any changes. Noticing his bandaged finger, the doctor redresses the wound. Edward heads home, watching happy couples stroll by. Then, he spots a new statue of Lincoln and stares at it for a while. As he walks away, the statue almost seems to come alive, watching him. That night, Edward finds a gift bag outside his door. It's filled with laundry detergent, face cream, and candies, along with a thank you note from Ingrid. Edward settles on the couch, opens the candies, but suddenly starts coughing. He removes the wet bandage from his hand and discovers his finger has completely healed. Just then, a piece of ceiling collapses, and a dead rat falls into the bucket. Later that night, loud knocking wakes him. Rescuers have come to retrieve his neighbor, who has tragically passed away. Moved, Edward adopts the deceased man's cat and watches from the window as the handsome young man's body is carried away. The next day, Edward and Ingrid have dinner at a cafe. She bombards him with questions, even making him promise never to talk about harming himself. The conversation shifts to plays he enjoys when suddenly someone outside taps on the window and waves at Edward, surprising Ingrid. Before they part, she declares he'll star in the play she's writing. That night, heavy rain worsens the leak in Edward's ceiling. As he inspects it, a chunk of plaster falls, injuring his face. When he wipes the blood, he accidentally peels off a piece of skin from his forehead and cheek. The next morning, the doctor is stunned by Edward's condition, though Edward himself is terrified. The doctor explains that the healing process involves shedding diseased cells, replaced by healthy ones, and gives Edward a mask to monitor the transformation. Later, Edward feels unwell, but experiences a rare moment of joy when someone from the ad recognizes him. At a cafe, the bartender greets him warmly, and another customer even compliments him. That night, Edward breaks down in tears but suddenly pulls at his skin, revealing a handsome face underneath. For the first time, he stares at his reflection, overwhelmed, and even learns to whistle, a feat once impossible due to his lip deformity. Soon, he heads to a bar, drinks with strangers, meets a woman, and ends the night in the restroom, marking a new chapter in his life. The next morning, Edward's doctor visits, worried about his missed follow-ups. Edward lies, saying the previous tenant passed away. Adopting a new identity, he introduces himself as Guy Maratz and ushers the doctor out, unaware that Ingrid overhears the conversation. Edward moves into a more luxurious apartment and begins dating various women. Over time, he becomes a wealthy, successful real estate agent, but deep down, he's still the same insecure man. One day, he spots Ingrid on the street and follows her, discovering she's directing a play on a small Broadway stage titled Edward. Upon entering and hearing a few lines, he realizes the play is based on his life. He accidentally catches the eye of the casting team during auditions for the role of Edward, but fails to impress Ingrid. Determined, he returns, wearing his mask. Ingrid is shocked by his new look, but this time, Edward, now Guy, delivers a brilliant performance alongside the actress playing Ingrid and lands the role. Later, he lies, saying his childhood friend was like that, but has since died, claiming that memory overwhelmed him during his first audition. Ingrid stays indifferent to his advances, and Edward, looking around the theater, feels like just another face in the crowd. Meanwhile, Ingrid is thrilled to have found someone who can bring her vision to life. Later, Ingrid invites Edward to her apartment. He notices his old typewriter and the late neighbor's cat, but says nothing. She offers him a drink and invites him to dance. They spend the night together. Soon, Edward begins rehearsing for the play, performing exceptionally, almost as if voicing his own thoughts. But one day, a man named Oswald, who also suffers from neurofibromatosis, visits the theater and takes an interest in the production. Oswald is charismatic and genuinely impressed by Edward's acting. That night, Ingrid suddenly asks Edward to put on his mask. When he does, she bursts into laughter, finding it so terrible it's almost funny. Sometime later, Edward spends an evening at a bar with his real estate colleagues when Oswald calls out to Guy, praising him as a future star. Everyone is surprised, but Oswald's charm wins them over. Once again, he compliments Guy's acting. At the next rehearsal, Edward criticizes Ingrid's portrayal of the protagonist. They argue, as Ingrid speaks from experience she doesn't truly have. Oswald arrives again, bonding quickly with the cast. Edward grows jealous of his easy charm, especially when Ingrid too is drawn to him. They share similar tastes, even favorite books. Oswald happily accepts her invite to stay for rehearsal. Later, the cast goes out drinking, and Edward watches silently as Oswald and Ingrid animatedly discuss her play's themes. Oswald argues that the protagonist's suicide feels implausible, saying that people like him actually cherish life deeply. Edward laughs along but grows bitter inside. Oswald keeps everyone entertained with jokes and even learns to whistle. That night, Edward wakes to find Ingrid rewriting the play. Oswald was right. Her Edward was too gloomy, too bland. She's rewritten him as a victim, falling into an obvious narrative trap. Furious, Edward protests. After all, when he said the same thing earlier, she ignored him, yet now she's changing everything because Oswald said it. They have a heated argument. At the next rehearsal, Edward's mask keeps slipping as his anger grows. Frustrated, he storms out. In the park, he finds Oswald doing yoga, surrounded by beautiful women and admiring the living Lincoln statue. They head to karaoke, where Oswald instantly charms the crowd with his singing. Edward watches, stunned, as everyone loves him, no one even noticing his appearance. At the next rehearsal, Edward learns Ingrid has replaced him with Oswald, claiming she had to change the concept entirely. Oswald even demanded a new role, a handsome man, to accompany his character. Edward is devastated, especially after realizing how much Ingrid knows about Oswald's personal life. He argues no one will believe such a transformation by the play's end, but Ingrid counters that it doesn't matter. The heroine sees the protagonist through the eyes of love. Heartbroken, Edward also faces rejection when Ingrid refuses to meet him that night. The play premieres and becomes a hit, with Oswald earning rave reviews. Edward watches Ingrid grow closer to Oswald and sinks deeper into despair. Oswald gains recognition and glowing press coverage. One day, Ingrid tells Edward she has to let him go. His mental state unravels. He starts stalking Oswald and sees him with a woman and child. Confronting Ingrid, Edward accuses Oswald of cheating, but she calmly explains that Oswald has a daughter and adored his late wife. She dismisses Edward entirely. Later, he overhears that Oswald is moving into his old apartment. Enraged, he smashes the repaired ceiling. That night, Edward relives fragments of his life. The next morning, wearing his old Edward mask, he greets potential buyers, then goes to the office and terrifies his coworkers with erratic behavior. He's fired. That evening, he storms into the theater, attacking Oswald on stage. During the struggle, part of the set collapses, severely injuring Edward's arms and legs. During recovery, Edward moves back into his old apartment, right next to Ingrid, who now lives with Oswald and is planning a film adaptation of Edward with a famous director. Edward barely reacts. He spends his days watching Oswald's vibrant life, playing saxophone, exercising, watching movies with Ingrid. Now pregnant, Ingrid radiates joy, baffling Edward's physiotherapist. When the therapist makes a cruel remark about people like Oswald, Edward stabs him, landing himself in prison. Years later, Edward meets Oswald and Ingrid again. Her play still thrives on Broadway, though Oswald has retired. The film adaptation never happened, much to Ingrid's relief. The couple is happy and preparing to move to Canada to join an artist community. Their children are grown. A waiter comes to take their order, but Edward hesitates, unable to decide. Oswald orders for him and jokes that his old friend hasn't changed a bit. And that's where the movie ends.